Hi, folks. In today's session, I'm going to go over something a little bit different. We're just going to talk about some theory about vibe coding in general, particularly with Replit, things that you need to be aware of when you're trying to create a project. The first thing is thinking of a mindset that you need to use when dealing with Replit or Lovable or any other agent-based platform. You need to have a developer mindset. There's things you're going to run into where the agent just does not particularly think like a developer yet, but it knows how to code, which kind of sounds strange, but it's a reality. Like the other day, for example, I was creating a new feature. It created the back end, the functionality in the back end, the API call for it, but didn't create the element in the front end to present it. But it still asked me, does it work? Test it out. Is it working? And not until I prompted it to say that the feature is probably there, but there is no front end rendering of it. You need to now connect it to the front end. Only until after that did it actually do any front end work. So you have to be aware of these challenges that you'll run into. And sometimes it knows what it's doing, but seems to over I don't know how to put it, but overdo the work. Like um, again, similar scenario, creating a new feature, asked it to edit something. It did the edit very quickly. Like I'm talking less than a minute. The feature was working, and I knew that because I had the server running so that I could test what it was doing. So I was testing, and it was functioning already, and it didn't stop. It kept going anyway. So it kept repeating what it was coding over and over and over and over again, as if it was a much more complex function when it was something very simple. And in the end, it wasted a whole lot of time and credit. So you have to be aware of that too and keep an eye on it and make sure that you stop it if you think that it's actually completed. Like just pause it and type a message and say, I'm just testing it. It looks like it's working already. Um, and ask it, well, what other work is there involved in completing the task? So you have to be aware of what it's doing and keep an eye on what it's doing. The other thing is thinking like a developer also means you structure how you do your work according to how you're going to scale your app. So one example of this is if you're using API calls, which I'm guessing most of you are, because the reality is these AI agents are only as powerful as the APIs they can call in. They don't build everything from scratch. Like if you're, in my case, trying to get data from a stock exchange, it's not going to be able to get that data magically by going and scraping websites and all that sort of stuff. You can, but most websites have ways of blocking you from doing that. So it's a very laborious way of doing it. So chances are you're going to be using APIs. And there's efficient ways to use APIs and there's inefficient ways to use APIs. If you set it up in an inefficient way where every time someone is looking up a piece of data, it requests that data, then you're going to end up with a scaling problem down the line where your business is going to cost a lot more to run than it can make potentially. So you have to be aware of those things. And if you can make calls where you can put the data in a database and call it locally from a database, you should do that. And all these sorts of techniques that you have to have a reasonable understanding of if you want to get the most out of these products, these new AI agent vibe coding style products. Um, you don't need to know how to code. I think that's something that's definitely clear. Like even if you did know how to code, it's not going to really help you much with this because the way that the AI codes will be totally different style. It may not even be human readable. So there may not be a point to trying to get in there and code yourself. If you do know how to code, then that's a different scenario altogether. You're probably getting the API to improve your code rather than having it to do all the heavy lifting. But in a case like mine, I don't know how to code, and there is no point in me even trying. And considering an AI can, in the space of like a minute, do hours and hours, even days worth of coding, there's no point in terms of efficiency in getting in there and playing with things on the coding level. But you do need to know how things are structured. You do need to know that, okay, some things are going to be stored in a database, and you should check that database. If you've given it a command and you're testing something, you should always check that if the data is being fetched or stored in a database, go have a look at the database and check that it's actually there, that it's actually made the changes. Because these agents are notorious for doing whatever it takes to please you and not actually finish the work. And be careful what examples you give it. Try not to give exact examples in your prompts, because it will hard code those examples. That's something I've found often. So, if I'm asking it to, create charts in my portfolio manager, I'm fetching share data, and I want to create a Sparkline chart, and I notice that the Sparkline chart is working in some cases, but not in others. If I say, for example, in the case of Microsoft, the Sparkline chart is not working, it will actually create a dummy Sparkline chart that's not real, put it in there, it's not getting it from live data, it will hard code it to basically shut you up, which is the last thing you want. Now, this happens often with AI. So you need to sense check, and you can only sense check if you can go into the logs and see what it's doing, look at the code when it's writing it to make sure it's not hard coded, or check in the database to see what it's added there. I've caught it out a number of times where it's hard coded something, and I basically said, remove the hard coded example. That's not why I'm giving you examples. You need to fetch the data via the API, and ask it questions of why the data isn't being fetched. So you need to be inquisitive and actually use problem-solving techniques to find out where it's getting stuck and why it's getting stuck. Otherwise, it'll find a workaround that doesn't actually build the feature, but makes it look like the feature is working. It'll create dummy data. It'll generate images rather than fetch images. It'll generate figures rather than fetch figures. So you have to be very careful there, and always sense check what it's doing, because it's essentially problem solving, and sometimes it's easier for it to create something that will convince you than it is to actually solve the problem that you're presenting with the criteria that you're giving it. So you just be aware of that, be very careful. There are new tools coming out that I've recently seen that allow you to put in workflows, user flows, and connect to design files and have a more holistic product manager approach rather than a developer approach. And I think those tools will become dominant coming up. Like, I just saw something released on Y Combinator called Tempo, and I just saw their launch video and saw previews of the way their agent works. Very impressive. I'm going to give it a try. Basically, things like account creation, authentication, payment integration are much more featureized rather than open-ended, where you have to chat with the agent to get it to implement it in the way that's needed. It's actually a setting. And the ability to free-form design is more built into the product. So I see products like Tempo eventually taking over this space. Lovable is also a very good product. It seems to be a lot more user-friendly than Replit and Cursor. But again, it doesn't do what Tempo does. So if the promise of Tempo is as good as the pitch videos and introduction is, then it will definitely wipe the floor with all of these other agents, and it will most likely make things like Figma obsolete, because it allows you to um, create user flows, allows you to put in feature roadmaps, and it connects to Figma, but I think eventually it will allow you to just do freeform design without anything like Figma. So the gap between design and code is well and truly gone. There is no more gap. And that means people like myself and other product designers or design leads out there are going to find themselves in this coding space, in this gray area where the lines are blurred much more often. And especially if people stop using developers to do the actual coding and they start using developers to manage the coding, then there might be a time where you basically have a developer putting in rules and basically setting guidelines for how the agent can code, and then a product person going in there and saying, okay, this is the design, the user flow, these are the features, and just working with prompting to get it to code, and the architecture, the technologies it uses, whether it's Next.js or React, or whether it uses Vite or some other variation or other framework, will all be decided by the developer, and that'll be their involvement, and it'll just be a matter of developers testing and checking code. So it's exciting times, but you have to change your mindset so that you make sure you check if these tools are doing what they say they are doing, and be vigilant with what they're doing. Don't let kick off a task and go get your coffee, because you'll come back and you'll find it's deleted some features, it's hard coded something else that you don't need, and broken something. So you just have to keep an eye on it and change your mindset, and keep trying new products, new platforms that are out there. I'll leave some links in the description on some of these other products that I mentioned. They're not paying me or anything, and it's not sponsored. I don't get any referral link. I just think it's useful to let the community know about these products that are out there. And yeah, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you on the next video.